Back down to business then on France 24. Owen Fairclough back with us again. A very important day for French industry, this key report on Peugeot. How are the markets treating this one?
Not very well, Stuart. It's not been a great week so far, it has to be said, despite that big ECB intervention. And then the last week, Peugeot particularly opening around 0.8% down. Those are the numbers on the markets for you. You can see London, Paris and Frankfurt a little bit gloomy at the opening bell. Worth mentioning Philips, though, the Dutch electronics giant. Its share price up around 0.5% after more cutbacks. I'll have more on that in just a moment. Let's look at the Asian markets as well. The Nikkei finishing the day at around 0.7% down, but remember, it is largely up for the last 3 months, only around 2% or so. And you can just see there, just the Hang Seng, even in Hong Kong, finding some green, up around 0.5% just before the close of play.
Well, that government report into Peugeot's future due out around about 10 o'clock Paris time, so it's about 40 minutes time. William Hildebrandt now takes a look at the company's viability as it tries to reverse years of decline.
A heavyweight in the auto industry. Last week, Peugeot Citroën, Europe's second biggest car maker, found out it's to be knocked off the CAC 40 after shares declined more than 60% over the past year. The company's sales have plunged in Italy, Spain and France, countries with sluggish economies. Peugeot Citroën is an icon of French industry. With 100,000 workers and 60 billion euros in annual sales. But in July, the company said it was burning through 200 million euros in cash per month and that it had to cut 8,000 jobs. Many of these layoffs would occur at the Aulnay-sous-Bois factory outside of Paris. France is already facing its highest unemployment rate in more than a decade, and the recently elected French president campaigned on reindustrializing the country.
An expert will assess Peugeot's finances first, then there'll be a consultation. The current proposal is unacceptable. It has to be renegotiated.
Analysts say the company's decline is indicative of a broader industrial decline across the country. The French government is set to release a report on Peugeot's restructuring plans. On Monday, the company celebrated 100 years at its historic Sochaux plant. But instead of standing the test of time, Peugeot looks fragile in its old age.
So rather a bittersweet centenary for that Peugeot factory as the company's future played out at the top of government. But Owen, this report might actually validate Peugeot's argument.
Well, you do get a sense, Stuart, going into this report coming out that President François Hollande and his team have perhaps cooled off a little bit since the moment during the summer when he called those plans to cut up to 8,000 jobs worldwide unacceptable, fairly hardline stance. There's a feeling now that really Peugeot doesn't have any other choice. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to look at the numbers for Peugeot to realise this is a company that can't go on much longer like that. It's true to say it has a reasonably good cash pile, around €1 billion in the coffers, which partly explains why it hasn't gone under just yet. But this is a company, let's not forget, that's losing around €200 million a month. It ended the first 6 months of this year with €800 million of losses. And the problem is, it's just been a little bit too slow to globalise. When you compare it to a company like Renault, which went into that partnership with Japan's Nissan, has done very well in emerging markets. That's where Peugeot needs to follow right now. It's simply a manufacturer that is making cars mostly in Europe that European drivers just aren't buying into.
Government going to want those jobs to stay here in France, isn't
and this is the conundrum, isn't it? We had François Hollande making that big statement, talking about revitalising the economy, bringing down unemployment, and that's really the aim here, to try and keep those jobs on French soil. The problem is, as I said, the markets for Peugeot are all in the east, countries like Russia, where we've seen sales rise by around 15% this year. That's where the money is to be made right now. That's certainly where the growth is. That's where Peugeot wants to move, and yet you've got this conundrum where the French government is desperate to try and keep some kind of presence here in France. We'll get more on that, of course, in that report that's out at 10.
Yeah, of course, we'll bring it to you here on France 24. Let's get some more of the day's news then. And the government of Qatar says it will make a decision in due course about whether to back a $37 billion takeover offer by commodities trader Glencore for mining firm Xstrata. The Middle Eastern state is Glencore's biggest shareholder, but it had refused Glencore's previous offer earlier this year. The bid's been raised to offer Xstrata investors more than 3 Glencore shares for every one they hold.
Philips is cutting another 2,200 jobs to complete a worldwide restructuring. The Dutch electronics maker is increasing the redundancies to meet €1.1 billion in savings. 4,500 job cuts were announced last year when Philips made a €1.3 billion loss, though the company did swing back to profit in the last quarter of this year.
And Nasdaq Group has drawn a line in the sand over compensating clients for the disastrous Facebook flotation. The Wall Street Exchange says it won't pay any more than $62 million in damages for firms who suffered when a computer glitch delayed the social network's market debut. Clients including UBS and Citigroup are asking financial regulators to reject the proposed statement.
Well, let's stick with another rejection, and indeed Facebook, just for a moment, because Portugal's Prime Minister has found out just what an unfriendly place the social network can be. He went on Facebook to try to level with voters about the extra austerity he imposed in return for a €78 billion international bailout. But it was a bit of a red rag for those who think their leader is out of touch with the effects of years of cutbacks.
When it comes to higher taxes, sometimes an apology isn't good enough. The Portuguese Prime Minister wrote on Facebook that announcing the new austerity measures was a thankless task. The vast majority of tens of thousands of comments were critical. Emotions are running high in the press too, with newspapers saying the government's taking away 1 month of people's salaries. Portugal was forced to seek a €78 billion bailout last year. Since then, people have been faced with an across-the-board tax hike.
I think that the measures are extremely unfair for the working class, which cannot escape taxes.
I think that the deficit is better, but people's lives haven't improved.
Social security contributions are set to increase more than 60%. That's 18% of monthly wages. Companies' welfare contributions, though, are being lowered to liberalize the labor market, a key reform demanded in exchange for bailout funding. The jobless rate stands at a record 15.7%. The new austerity measures suggest Portugal is having trouble meeting targets laid out by the European Union as part of the bailout agreement. On Tuesday, the government will announce the EU's latest review of its economic performance. Both Brussels and Berlin have praised Portugal's efforts, but the political will could be fraying as opposition parties are wary of greater austerity.
Yeah, be careful with Facebook. You never know what's going to happen.
Safer to stick to Twitter, don't you think?
Not sure. Maybe not. Owen, thank you very much. Owen Fairclough with the business here on France 24. Latest news. Claire will have it for you after the break.
The Oyapock River divides giant Brazil from French Guiana. Until recently, it was possible to cross freely from one bank to the other. But now everything has changed. The construction of a bridge has brought permanent border controls. Far from bringing France and Brazil closer together, the bridge has become a symbol of mutual misunderstanding. Reporters, today, 1:40 p.m. Paris time on France 24.